Hello and welcome into another episode. My name is Johanna and I am the host and the creator of this Healing Anxious Attachment podcast. I'm also the host and creator of the Becoming Secure community. Today, we're going to talk about a sneaky concept which is called high functioning anxiety. And this word came into my awareness when I was watching something else on YouTube, and it was on someone's thumbnail. And without even clicking over and watching that video, I have no idea what it said. It just opened up something in my mind where I was like, oh, that is so a thing. And I see high functioning anxiety in myself, and I see it in a lot of the women that I work with that have anxious attachment tendencies. So even as you hear the term, you might already resonate and be able to, as I did, have this felt sense of what that probably is. But let's talk about it. So you might be the woman or the friend that people turn to or lean on or see as very reliable, the grounded one, the calm one, the one who seemingly has her shit together in most areas of life. But your experience might be that you are aware that you seem fine on the outside, but internally you experience a lot of anxiety. And that might show up as feeling a lot of urgency, pressure to perform, pressure to do more, or this feeling that you're never doing enough, feeling like people can't hold you, feeling like they wouldn't understand and that your stress is just really unique and you doubt that anyone else would have the answers or have the solutions. So to someone else on the outside, everything looks good, but you might really feel like your body is screaming on the inside, or things are hanging by a thread, or it's a fluctuation of stress, so never fully out of control, but just kind of lingering there. And what happens when we are in this is we are performing calm. We are managing our image, and we also tend to repress our truth just to keep peace, whatever that might look like. So in this episode, we're going to dive deeper more into this concept of high functioning anxiety in women and how emotional repression, which is sort of a side effect of this, is really self-abandonment, and why your nervous system might not be that regulated and it might actually be shut down. And we're going to, more importantly, explore what your system is probably actually really craving, what it takes to feel safe in relaxing or feeling soft, and why and what you might need to actually get yourself there. So if you're someone who's been doing the work, who resonates with being quite intellectual, you can understand everything you're learning from this podcast or a book, but you still feel this sense of stress, of disconnection from yourself, then hopefully through this is where it's going to start to land on how to manage this and, I want to say, not recover, but like heal this on a body level. Because as you've heard me say before, so much of what we're operating with is happening subconsciously. Even though the mind understands, the subconscious will win until we work with our subconscious. And we can't work with our subconscious through the thinking mind. Nevertheless, we're going to talk about it today. So as I said, high functioning anxiety is not the anxiety that people expect, which is panic or shyness or being really stuttery or unable to manage in life. The high functioning anxiety is the women who get things done while still experiencing these symptoms of urgency, worry, overthinking, feeling like I'm so busy, or I need to be making more money, I'm not doing enough. It looks like competence on the outside, but often feels like chaos on the inside. And as I said, this is typically fueled by this thought or this fear of either being too much or not enough if we are not performing. So we perfect, we please, and perform instead. And let's break down why those behaviors make perfect sense in some ways. So when we perfect, we try to become the ideal version of a partner. We can read the cues of romantic interest or friends. We can adjust our reactions. We can anticipate their needs. We can stay a couple steps ahead emotionally. And that can feel like love, but it can also sneakily actually be control. And this is just one relationship example, but we might be perfecting or acting out perfectionism in all areas of our life. And of course, that is a way to try and feel in control of other people's feedback or experience, or a way to validate to ourselves that we're good enough if something is perfect. But as you might know, the loop of perfectionism is that it never feels perfect and it never feels good enough. So we're just trapped actually in the subconscious belief that we are not enough. It needs to be more perfect and not enough and not enough. And it's just feeding this like elusive belief. So we may also have pleasing behavior. And this is another one that has its own specific flavor in high functioning anxiety, because sometimes we hear the word people pleaser and you might think, oh, that's someone who's really fawning, they're shutting down, they're just doing whatever people say, they're a follower, they're a sheep. I'm not like that. And the sneaky thing about it is that when we have high functioning anxiety, the people pleasing can look very different. It can still have a sense of confidence behind it, or like this presence and energy that you might bring, but what's happening is you're downplaying your preferences or your edges, or not bringing up things that are bothering you because you don't want to rock the boat, just kind of making yourself easy to love, easy to be around by overfunctioning and doing things for other people, which leads directly into the third example which I gave, which is performing. So performing is this way that we tend to, and a lot of people do this obviously, we tend to curate who we are. And the high functioning anxiety woman tends to wear this mask of like the chill girl, low maintenance, has it all together, fine with everything, still maybe high standards, but can handle it all, right? It's not a big deal, it's all good. All while carrying this really heavy weight underneath that is unmet needs, and that can come with this anxiety that shows up in the gut or the chest or headaches. And we'll talk more about the body experience. So before we go further in that, I want to also define one more term, which is called masking, which you've maybe heard of. And again, it's kind of intuitive. So masking is a form of camouflaging our emotion, where our outward behavior hides the inner reality. And remember, camouflage does not mean that it disappears or that the emotions just go away. It means they are covered, literally camouflaged or hidden. And this can be a really unconscious behavior. It's happening automatically, instantaneously, and it's because we likely learned it and picked it up from a very young age. And it became a means of getting love or seeking survival. And it just comes pouring out of us very effortlessly. And it sounds like, I'm fine. No, it's no big deal. I've got it. When what you actually might feel is overwhelm or unseen, or oh shit, I shouldn't have said yes to that because I'm actually super busy. And the purpose of me explaining this is, one, so we have a mutual definition of the word masking, and two, so that you can understand that this is probably part of this high functioning anxiety. So now we're going to take a very deep dive into the inner landscape and the drivers for the woman who has high functioning anxiety. So what we often experience is the pressure or the perceived pressure to be the stable one in relationships. You've probably built your identity in some ways on being the calm one. Even if you were falling apart, it probably wouldn't come through to the close people in your life. And when we do that, this stability or this accountability part of us can become our role instead of our truth. So there are points in life where my truth is that I'm available to be the stable one right now. I'm available to be the accountable one right now. But for me to try and hold that literally all the time is no longer in alignment with my truth. At some point, that's just not going to be it. At some point, you should not always be the one holding everything for everyone. That's not human anymore. So if this is the role or the identity we've created, then it probably comes with others relying on us, but no one really checking on you. And that can create a bit of resentment in friendships or family dynamics, because again, another part of you is looking to be supported and has maybe never really felt that way. And so because you know that you want that on some level and people aren't giving it to you or bringing it to you or checking on you, then of course we're going to feel resentful because we're not getting a need met. And even as that resentment or that disappointment builds, whatever it is for you, the pattern is to tend to continue to masquerade as being chill or being fine. And the thing about emotions is that they are energy. You may have heard this saying, and maybe I've said it even on the podcast, that emotions are energy in motion. Some people's emotions are very explosive. So some people explode when they feel anger or resentment or whatever it is. But for the high functioning anxiety system, there can be a tendency to implode instead, which means that the intensity of the energy gets turned back on ourselves and starts to show up as the perfectionism, the inner critic, the self-sabotage, the internal sort of self-berating. So it can come through as kind of a really mean voice that is trying to control us even more or keep our energy even more dialed in a certain way, or blaming us for feeling any negative or big emotion. So that's happening again in a very internal or private way most of the time. And we want to uphold, or like subconsciously we want to uphold being easygoing because of fear. Fear of being a burden, for example, fear of being too much, or a doubt that the other person could actually handle what we are really feeling. And when we do that, we are repressing or suppressing our emotions. And emotional repression is a form of self-abandonment. So when we push down our truth to maintain peace or because we don't feel safe, it actually starts to really erode our self-trust and our connection to ourselves. Because every time we have the experience of, oh, what I actually want is this, how I actually feel is this, and then we override and override and override, we are just telling ourselves that we fundamentally are wrong. The emotion we're experiencing is wrong, the desire we're feeling is wrong, the boundary we're feeling is wrong, the need that we want is wrong. And when our internal dialogue or subconscious dialogue is saying, oh, this is what I want, no, that's wrong, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down, of course, we're going to start to not trust our own instincts and desires. And this habit of repression, again, is like something that can happen so instantaneously, and it can even feel like control and managing stress, but really it's creating disconnection. So every time we silence our inner voice or what we really want or what is authentic to us, we teach ourselves it's not safe to feel. Now, continuing on in this exploration of the inner landscape and circling a little bit back to perfectionism, something that happens with perfectionism and high-functioning anxiety is that you probably don't demand that much perfection from other people, but you certainly expect it of yourself. And the story behind that, which we may hear, we may not hear, sounds like, if I do it perfectly, then I'll be chosen. Or if I do it perfectly, then I'll be loved, then I'll be appreciated, then I'll be safe, then I'll be validated. But perfectionism in this way usually is not safe at all. It creates stress in the body. It creates the fight or flight response to come on. It's a prison. It's a loop. It's like something that we are forever stuck in because, as I said, it's fueling the ultimate belief that we might be carrying right now, which is I'm not enough. So now we've looked at perfectionism and people-pleasing, emotional suppression, and the masking. And when we are controlling and contorting in these ways, the body is going to start to be affected in a symptomatic way. So sometimes our body starts to say no to this behavior before it's actually coming through our words or before our mouth does. So then we see burnout, headaches, fatigue, digestive issues, low libido. So our body becomes this place where the truth of how we're feeling actually starts to kind of leak out. And this is the manifestation of feeling really exhausted from hiding and holding it all. And these somatic symptoms are often the nervous system kind of waving flags and saying, hey, I need you to pay attention to me. And because in a lot of ways this ultimately comes down to stress itself, even though the stress can have a lot of different faces, worry, overwhelm, fear, insecurity, it's still stress, right? It is a stress response. And if we pride ourselves on staying composed, that's not always regulation. That's not always being calm. It's sometimes suppression, right? So if you're someone who can kind of just hold yourself in a very steady, grounded way, especially in front of other people, there's power in that for sure. And there's definitely a time and a place where we're not just gonna dump our emotions everywhere all the time and be like super chaotic and out of control all the time. We certainly need tools to self-soothe. And this is why it's so important to understand your own unique system and how your patterns show up. So in another episode, or a few of them, I talk about this quiz that I developed, which is, which anxious attachment type are you? So in all of the literature of attachment styles, it talks about 4 types: anxious, avoidant, disorganized, and secure. And it puts anxious and avoidant, but anxious into this category, right? But because I've worked with so many women with anxious attachment, I can see that within that one category, there's at least 4 different categories. And one of those categories is what I call the affection enthusiast. And one of the tendencies of the affection enthusiast tends to be very clear and open with her emotions. So this is where we see in the shadow side, let's say, the jealousy, the neediness, the desperateness that really almost leaks out uncontrollably. Now, there's another archetype called the calm and collected overthinker. And I would put the calm and collected overthinker as the one with high functioning anxiety, or at least one of the ones, because she is more likely to be contained, even though her internal experience might be just as jealous, just as needy, just as desperate feeling. And the reason that I'm saying this is because it's important that we don't take blanket statements for nervous system regulation to heart too much, because it can be a trap. So what I was saying is that this ability to hold still, basically, to regulate in this way, is in some ways what the affection enthusiast needs. She needs to learn how to control her emotions a bit, to steady herself, to self-soothe. But the calm and collected overthinker, or the woman with high functioning anxiety, actually needs to learn to work with that energy and to allow it to move through the body so that it doesn't stay and become suppressed and become tension or frustration or anger or impatience, or what's the word that I used before? Resentment. Okay, so hopefully you can see how there's a difference here, even though both characters have anxious attachment. Now, if you're resonating as a woman with high functioning anxiety, you can probably soothe yourself so well that no one knows you're hurting. So that type of self-regulation is really more isolating, and it's hiding behind control. But real self-regulation would actually include letting other people in an appropriate way. So now that we've really mapped the experience of high function anxiety, let's talk about what this system is craving. And whenever we talk about these different terms, or I don't want to say identity, but like a title, for example, and I'm very careful with this word title because I don't want you to take it as like, this is me and I'm just stuck this way, right? This is just a handful of symptoms or a handful of behaviors that go together in one category. It doesn't mean it's who you are or need to be forever. We don't have to keep our anxious attachment tendencies. We can work with them and heal them so that we can have secure attachment tendencies instead, right? Okay, so we're talking about this energetic state that is high functioning anxiety. It's just a shape that a nervous system can go into, and that might be your current default nervous system. But beneath this shape, which is over-regulating, over-performing, holding it all together, there's probably the more authentic part of you, a very real human part of you that is craving softness and gentleness and space, and this feeling of you don't need to prove anything to be loved here. And what these parts of you that haven't been seen may want to feel are real lived human moments of nervous system relief. So this is not something we can ever think our way into, right? It has to be lived. And I'll give you some examples, which is letting your body just relax while you're in the shower and no one's asking you for anything, or letting yourself cry just because you feel sad. You don't even have to make sense of it, just letting the tears move through your body. It might be the experience of having a friend who actually checks in on you, not because she doesn't think you're fine. Of course, she knows you can handle yourself, but just because she cares and she's just as attuned as you are to knowing that behind our capable exteriors, everybody wants to feel in connection and supported. Maybe it's you turning off your phone for a few hours in an afternoon because the world can wait and you know that your body just needs some felt peace. Maybe it's deleting the Instagram app every evening at 7 p.m. to give yourself space. Maybe it's letting yourself say out loud, I don't know what I need yet. I don't know what I need. I don't know how I feel. Without any guilt or without apology, whatever it means to you, like practicing telling the truth of what you actually need and how you actually feel. And obviously these in some ways are very micro moments, they're simple things, but they are nervous system safety. And it's these real life and lived moments that tell your body you're not in danger for slowing down, you're not at threat for softening, you don't have to hold it all, you're allowed to be with yourself and the anxiety just as it is. And the nervous system is literally going to require this to happen in order to shift. And on a bit of a more zoomed out level, if we want to stop anxiety in general or be able to manage our anxiety better, whether it's the high functioning concealed version or the outright very blatant version, we need to cultivate a few things, which is safety, attunement, regulation, slowness, being connected to the truth of what's happening for us. So when I say safety, I don't mean intellectual safety. Almost all of us in any moment can intellectually understand that we are safe, but we need to feel embodied safety. And that comes through giving ourselves these consistent signals that it's okay to slow down, to feel, to not be in performance mode, to let someone else handle something and be okay with it. Attunement would be the ability to be witnessed by someone else in your truth. And ideally, they're witnessing you with warmth and love and compassion, but we need to relate with people who are able to hold the thing that our nervous system needs. So perhaps this is someone who doesn't rush you, someone who meets you where you are, someone who makes you feel like they have a lot of time for you. Because that's probably the thing in some ways that we didn't get, right? And I know I've said this in episodes before, but this is really important. The wounds that we carry, the relational wounds, and definitely the wounds that relate to our attachment system, happened with someone else. Whether they meant to do it or not, it happened in relationship, and therefore it can ultimately only be healed in relation to someone else too. And this can be a friend, a therapist, a romantic interest. It can be me in the membership. It's someone who's able, though, to meet you and see you where you are and hold space for that, and you letting them be there, right? Now, another thing required to sort of open through this shape that is high functioning anxiety, to settle that buzzing, tight, overwhelm energy, is through expression. And this means expression of your truth, your emotions, which can obviously come through emotional release, but it can also come through breath and art and conversations. But it has to happen, okay? It will never just happen if we're not changing something about how we actually behave. And the last one that I'll speak to is this idea of slowness. So anxiety is a very rushed feeling. It comes with urgency and fear and like a chaos, and it doesn't usually feel slow in any way. Although it might cause us to shut down, but it doesn't mean that the feeling is slow. So healing anxiety does not happen at the speed of your to-do list where you can just bang things out and get it done, right? It happens actually in the pausing, in connecting to your senses, in learning how to drop into your body, in being aware of what's happening around you, in mindfulness. And I'm sure these are things that you say you want more of because part of you knows that that's what's required, but we have to actually weave them into our life. So it's the practice of giving your system enough chances to remember what it feels like, to be safe enough to let go. And when your nervous system actually feels held, then you can find the power and the beauty in what is underneath, which is a relaxation, a surrender, a softness that maybe right now feels like weakness, but it actually is the peace that you're looking for. So when I was at this point of being extremely overfunctioning, extremely people-pleasing, incredibly masking, I would understand that there was a problem, that I felt so stressed, so unnecessarily in survival mode underneath, but I would think that I could or needed to figure it out all by myself, which is ironically part of the pattern. So I would consider, I need help or I need to do something about this, but then just as fast I would get this feeling like I should just get it. I should just be able to figure it out. And that is so part of the trap. And so what I needed to do was slow my ass down and sit with practices and close my eyes and feel my body, because that is actually required and it couldn't be rushed, which was and is still an uncomfortable practice because it has been my default mode for so long to go into performance and doing and productivity. But that is, of course, the very pattern that we're trying to interrupt, so that when I am in productivity mode, it's coming from a place of I actually have energy for this, I actually have desire for this. I'm not just pushing to get something out there or pushing to get validation. For example, I'm on day 3 of my cycle, which means day 3 of bleeding. And for the last 2 days, day 1 and day 2, I literally did basically nothing except reading romantasy books, okay? Which I don't know if I've said this in another podcast, but from the time I was 13 to 29 years old, let's say 13 to 30 to make it easy, or 15 to 30, for 15 years, I didn't read any fiction. I barely watched any TV. I even had years where I didn't even listen to music, only podcasts, because I was so obsessed with learning and more personal development and more information. If I could just learn more, I would figure it out. That did me well in a lot of ways, and it really moved me forward in my entrepreneurial journey. But in the end, it turned into a ton of burnout, heavily affected how I showed up in romantic relationships, which is what we're going to talk about in the next episode, and manifested in all sorts of tension in my body and honestly just feeling super freaking anxious all the time. So yes, it sounds nice to think about reading for 5 hours for 2 days in a row and me just basically skipping any work to-dos that I had yesterday, but that requires meeting the edge of a lot of uncomfortability, a lot of thoughts of guilt or shame or I should be doing more, and those are the part of the pattern that get removed when we can listen so closely to our body that we just know what we are available or not available for in terms of energy, boundaries, type of relationships, the way we want people to show up, the truth of whether our cup is overflowing, the amount of love we have to give. So when we're trying to shift out of this, you do not need more mental understanding. Just by listening to this podcast, you already have enough. And you probably knew, actually, in some ways, a lot of what I was saying. I've just put it together in a very succinct, orderly fashion. The body needs different experiences. It needs to be guided into slowness, to sit in practice, to be in the body, not just in some attempt at silent meditation where your thoughts are just spiraling around, right? And this is exactly why I created the Becoming Secure membership, not as a place to learn more and intellectualize deeper, but as a place to practice. So in the membership, that's why there's, oh my gosh, well over 30 guided somatic practices. And they're not long. They're like less than 15 minutes long, but it forces you to have to put your headphones in and press play and just be led, not left alone in your anxious mind trying to sit still, but be led into your body and into and through those uncomfortable edges that I talked about, and those parts of you that are like, oh God, but I should be doing more, but what about this? All the fear. Those are the parts that we go in and we just slowly untangle them and slowly unwind them and offer safety and safety and safety. And it's very hard for me to explain it to you because it's the exact opposite of explaining. It's being with yourself. But I'm there to guide you. So each one is going to help to regulate, to soften, to come back to your truth. And it's so doable. It's so doable, but we just don't do it until we're like, okay, I'm ready because I'm sick of this tension in me. I'm sick of the stress. I want to open. I want to feel held. And maybe you also want to feel held in romantic relationship. So if this episode made you feel very seen, then the membership is where you're going to start to feel different. Thank you so much for listening. I would love, love, love to hear from you. So you're going to be able to find my Instagram handle in the show notes. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about how high functioning anxiety sabotages intimacy and romantic relationship and what we need to do instead. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there and hopefully meeting you in the membership. In the meantime, take care and I'll talk to you soon.